And who would have thought? I would have never guessed this. But right now, after 7 games, the Indianapolis Colts have the best record in the NFL at 6-1. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL Top 10's for Wednesday. Hope everyone's doing well. This is Ernie Jennings, your host, and today we're going to look at a few of Week 7's top 10s as well as the standings after Week 10. So, who are the big movers up and down as far as top 10s go, and in the standings? What's the big moves there? Any big movements in the standings as far as that goes? So, we'll take a look at both of those things in this podcast. So, let's start with some of those Week 7 leaders. And the first one we'll do is yards from scrimmage. This past week, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey came in after Sunday with a big game, and then Jahmyr Gibbs had 218 yards. Christian McCaffrey had 201. Both really good games. Jahmyr Gibbs, his 218 yards from scrimmage were 136 rushing and 82 receiving in a win. Big game for him and the Lions. They needed a win after that loss to Kansas City. And then Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers, 201 yards, 129 yards rushing, 72 receiving, and that was a win as well. He was impressive. I mean, he just kept breaking off runs, 5 to 10 yards. One of his touchdowns into the end zone, he just was leaning back against the defense and just kept pushing with his legs all the way into the end zone. Pretty impressive. Then there's a bit of a drop-off to number 3, which was Devontae Smith for the Eagles. As a wide receiver, no rushing yards, 183 yards receiving to put him at number 3 as far as yards from scrimmage go. And that was also a win. Now, number 4 was Oronde Gadsden for the Chargers, had 164 yards, all receiving. That's one of the 3 losses on this list as far as the top 10 players, yards from scrimmage. 3 people it ended up in a loss for their team. Oronde Gadsden in 4th, Jaylen Warren for the Steelers in a close game there, and then lost to the Bengals. He had 158 yards, 127 rushing, 31 receiving. And then in 9th, Jordan Addison for the Vikings had 128 yards receiving in a loss as well. Those are your top players, some of them. But the top 2, Jahmyr Gibbs and Christian McCaffrey, with over 200 yards. So when we look at for the season, where does that rank for the season? Well, so far this season, there's been 6 players. I should say 6 times that a player has rushed or had from yards from scrimmage more than 200 yards. Christian McCaffrey did it this past weekend for his 201 yards that he had that I mentioned earlier. But leading the top of this list is Rico Dowdle for the Panthers with 239 yards, one more than Bijan Robinson for the Falcons. But Rico Dowdle had 183 yards rushing and then 56 more yards receiving. He did that in week 6. And what's fascinating about that, he beat the number he had the week prior, which was 234 yards, which put him at number 3 on this list. He has 2 of the top 3, 239 yards, 234. When he had 234, 206 of those yards were rushing. The only player over 200 yards so far this season as far as rushing goes. Then he had another 28 receiving. Now, every player except for Derrick Henry in week 1, his team won the game. In week 1, Derrick Henry was number 8 spot, had 169 yards rushing, 13 yards receiving for a total of 182. But that was in a loss in week 1, that crazy game with the Buffalo Bills, where they both scored 40-plus points, 41-40, I believe it was. That's the only person who's lost, their team has lost in a particular game. So Rico Dowdle has the number 1 and 3 spot. Bijan Robinson for the Falcons had 238 yards, like I said, 1 less than Rico Dowdle. He had 170 yards rushing and 68 yards receiving in his win in week 7. In week 6, I'm sorry. So in week 6, you had Rico Dowdle with 239 yards from scrimmage, and Bijan Robinson with 238 yards from scrimmage. That's pretty incredible. So when you're looking at this top 10 list here, Rico Dowdle is on this list twice, and Bijan Robinson's on this list twice. They're the only two players in the top 10 twice. Rico Dowdle first and third, Bijan Robinson second and ninth. In week 4, Bijan Robinson had 181 yards, 75 rushing, and 106 yards receiving, which is the only time on the list here that a running back had more yards receiving than he did rushing to equal out his total number. So pretty impressive. So those top 3, Dowdle, Robinson, and Dowdle again, all in the 230s. And then Jahmyr Gibbs just this past week had 218 yards to finish 4th so far this season as far as most yards. And like I said, there's only been 6 players so far this season with more than 200 yards from scrimmage. So pretty good games from these players, all wins. What's fascinating is how well Rico Dowdle did these past 2 weeks. And then in week 7, they cut his carries back. So we'll see how long they continue to do that. All right. Let's look at another thing here. Week 7 leaders, quarterback rushing yards. This was Drake May by a fair amount here. 62 yards he had rushing this past week. Bo Nix for the Broncos had 48. And Jaden Daniels had 35. And then you have a lot. It's just a drop off all the way down to Justin Fields and Jordan Love, who both had 22 yards. Not too big of a thing here, except for Drake May's 62. And when you look at that for the entire season, Justin Fields leads this category with 81 yards, but that was a loss. Lamar Jackson had 70 in a loss in week 1. That's the same week that Derrick Henry had so many rushing yards. And then we do have Drake May coming in this week, in week 7. He had, for 7th place, he had 62 yards, which is good enough to time for actually 5th with Jalen Hurts, who did it twice, week 1 and week 4. He had 62 yards twice. So looking at this list right now, Jalen Hurts is on it twice. And other than that, no one else is on this list more than one. Or Patrick Mahomes, I should say, is also on this list twice. He had a 66-yard game in week 2. And then in week 5, he had 60 yards, which was good enough to put him in 8th on the season leaders in quarterback rushing. So there's a couple more offensive stats that I didn't get to on Tuesday. Now, looking at some of these defensive stats, and only looking really, were there any players to break into the top 10 as far as tackles, for example? And yes, this past week, Alonda Roberts for the Raiders had 18 tackles, which tied him for the most tackles this season in a single game. He tied Jordan Brooks, who in week 4 had 18 as well. And then Devin White also for the Raiders. It tells you how that game went when it was 31-0 for the Chiefs. Not very good. Raiders defense was on the field a lot, which explains why they had so many tackles. But Devin White for the Raiders had 16, which is good enough to time for 5th this season in most tackles. So you had 2 of the top 10 are Raiders, and that was just this week. They're the only 2 to break into the top 10 this week as far as tackles go. Now, interceptions, nobody still has more than 2 in a game, which obviously is still a really good game. This is a stat that doesn't move very much. All you do is continue to have more and more players with a certain stat, but you have quite a few players. You have 7 players with 2. And there were 6 this week. J.C. Horn for the Panthers in their really low-scoring game, 13-6, but he had 2 interceptions in that game. So he jumped on this list of players with 2 interceptions in a single game. And then the last stat we'll look at is sacks. And this week, Micah Parsons had 3 sacks to jump into this top 10 list. 3 sacks, in their win over the Arizona Cardinals, which is a very close game. I tell you, the Arizona Cardinals have lost more close games, and often it's because of something they did where you're like, why did you do that? Or they had some crazy play. But Micah Parsons' 3 sacks in that game was good enough to put him second on this list. Tuli Tuipulotu for the Chargers is still at the top with 4 sacks. Incredibly, with 4 sacks by himself against the Giants, it was still a loss in a close game, while Micah Parsons' game was a win. And that is the only player this week to make it into the top 10 as far as sacks go. All right. So that's a little look at the last look at top 10s this week. For week 7, we'll be looking at week 8 here starting tomorrow. But now let's look at the standings for what we have after week 7 before we get into week 8 and see how things are progressing. One of the most fascinating divisions as far as the top 2 is the AFC East with the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. And currently, the Patriots are in the lead by a half game because they have played 7 games while the Bills have only played 6. So the Bills win this week, or whenever the Patriots have a bye week, then obviously the Bills will have a chance to catch up and if they win. But right now the Patriots are in first because within the division they're 2-0 while the Buffalo Bills are 2-1 and their loss is to the Patriots. So the Patriots have looked so incredibly good lately. And in fact, they were 1-2 when they went on a 4-game winning streak to now be 5-2. I mean, honestly, it looks like the Bills just basically going to wrap this up because at that time when they were 3-0 while the Patriots were 1-2. So it looked pretty bad for the rest of the division, but not anymore. Now, AFC North. Pittsburgh Steelers lead this 4 wins, 2 losses. They had such a chance against the Bengals to really put some distance between themselves and the rest of the AFC North, and they couldn't do it. Cincinnati Bengals were able to win. They are now 3-4. So really it will matter to how the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have played 1 less game, do. Whether if they lose, obviously it tightens it up a little bit more. Now what's Cincinnati Bengals, like I said, 3-4. What they have in their favor right now is they're 2-0 in the division, while the Pittsburgh Steelers are 1-1. So Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to continue to win if the Cincinnati Bengals are able to. And I think the Bengals have a shot with their kind of schedule they have this the rest of the way out. Now, looking at the AFC South, well, 2 weeks ago, both the Colts and the Jaguars were 4-1. Now, after 2 weeks later, the Indianapolis Colts are 6-1 and the Jaguars are 4-3. So the Colts have now jumped out to a 2-game lead in this division. The Houston Texans are 2-4. Now they've only played 6 games, so they could get to 3-4 and try to stay within reach. Tennessee Titans 1-6. So pretty quickly, the Titans will be fighting for the best draft spot coming up for next year. Now within the division, the Colts and the Jaguars are still only played 1 divisional game. They both won their games. So this could be interesting when they play each other. That could be huge, especially for the Jaguars if they continue to be 2 games back. Jaguars are on a bye week this week, so we'll see what happens. Now, looking at the last AFC division, that's the West. Denver Broncos with that crazy, incredible win over the Giants, where the Broncos scored 33 points in the final quarter to pull that game out. I mean, I was watching that game and I'm thinking, I cannot believe the Chargers and the Broncos are letting the Chiefs back into this division, and lo and behold, Broncos pull that out. They are 5-2, while the Chargers and the Chiefs are both 4-3. Now the Chiefs are still in third place because they are 1-1 in the division. Chargers are 3-0 in the division, but now they do have 3 losses. Denver Broncos are 0-1, so they have not played as many divisional games as the rest of the league has, the rest of the division has. And the Raiders bring it up at 2-5. They looked horrible against the Chiefs last week, losing 31-0. That I'm not even sure, honestly, how long Pete Carroll may last. The offense just looks horrific. Geno Smith doesn't look that good. The offensive line can't block whether they're running or trying to protect the quarterback. It's just looked bad. And I do honestly feel like the offense is from 1982 or something. I just don't like it at all. But anyway, Broncos hold a 1-game lead right now over the Chargers and the Chiefs in AFC West. All right, let's move to the NFC. Then we'll look at the NFC East first. Philadelphia Eagles were 4-0, went on a 2-game losing streak like the Buffalo Bills had done when they're the two only undefeated team and they both lost 2 in a row. But the Eagles rebounded last week and now are 5-2. 2-game lead over the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Commanders, though Cowboys are in second because they're 3-1. Eagles 5-2. Dallas Cowboys, like I said, 3-1. Commanders are 3-4, and the Giants are 2-5. Wow, the Giants just really had a shot to try to stay within reach of the Eagles, and wow, lost that game in the end against the Broncos. So they're 2-5 right now. They do look pretty impressive with the new quarterback and with Cam Scatabo as well. Eagles look pretty good this last week, as did the Dallas Cowboys. Big win over the Commanders. So we'll see how that goes. Within the division, though, they have played a lot of divisional games already compared to the other divisions in the NFL. It's pretty interesting how many. I mean, already the Cowboys have played 6 divisional games, and we're only going into week 8. That's not normal. Usually they save a lot of the divisional games. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's conference games. They've played 2 or 3 games, so that's much more realistic. Eagles are 1-1 in the division. Cowboys are 2-1. Commanders 1-1, and the Giants 1-2 in the division. I was looking at conference where the Eagles really have done well. They're 4-1, while the other 3 teams have losing records within the conference. So the Eagles right now hold a decent lead here, and as good as the Cowboys are doing on offense, I don't know that they can keep up with the Eagles and the Commanders. Well, right now they're having a hard time. No quarterback's out. McLaurin's out and maybe back this week, but he was out last week. So was Deebo Samuels. They just can't keep their star players on the field at one time, and it's really hurting their chances to stay in touch with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, looking at a very tough conference, probably one of the toughest actually overall, is the NFC North, where the Green Bay Packers are 4-1 and lead the division. Now they've only played 6 games as well, while the Detroit Lions are 5-2, so they played 7 games. The only team in the division who've played 7 games right now at this point. And then Chicago Bears, incredibly, are 4-2. They were 0-2. They looked like, this whole thing with a new coach and a new and improved quarterback wasn't panning out, and lo and behold, they go 0-2, and now they've went 4-0 since then. So they are 4-2, and the Minnesota Vikings are 3-3. So everybody's at least at 500. So the difference between these 3 teams is a game, basically. I mean, the Green Bay Packers could lose a couple of games while the Minnesota Vikings win, and it's a big difference. Right now, looking at the division, where the Packers and the Vikings have the advantages, they are both 1-0 in the division, 1 win, no losses. Lions are 1-1 in the division, losing that game to Green Bay in the first game of the season. And then the Chicago Bears, their 2 losses have been within the division, so they're 0-2 in the division. But this is going to be a very competitive division. I mean, I honestly did not think the Bears would be quite this good, but they have looked pretty good. Despite, honestly, I think also right now, Caleb Williams looks okay, but he doesn't look great. Now, if he improves, while the defenses look decent, and he's got some good players, and Swift has looked awfully good running the ball, they could really be tough. Detroit Lions have looked good despite the loss to the Packers and the Chiefs. They've looked pretty good as well. The Packers are the ones that you just don't know. I mean, they tied that game with the Cowboys, and then they lost. I think it was to Cleveland, which was a crazy loss. So I don't know quite what to think of them at this point in time, but they are in first place. All right, let's look at the NFC South. Well, Tampa Bay was running away with this. Um, they were 5-1 going into last week when they lost. They're at 5-2. The Carolina Panthers have won four of their last five and three in a row to move up to 4-3. They're ahead of the Atlanta Falcons, who are 3-3, who did not play. So they're one less game than the rest of the division. Every other team in the NFC South has played 7 games, while the Atlanta Falcons have only played 6. So with a win, the Falcons would tie the Carolina Panthers at the same record. But right now, the Panthers are in second, only a game back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, incredibly. Now, when you look at the schedule, though, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing some tough teams. The Carolina Panthers have not played quite the same type of schedule. Now, looking at the division numbers, both the Panthers and the Buccaneers are 1-0. So that's good for them as far as maintaining that position, while the Atlanta Falcons are 0-2. And again, the Atlanta Falcons, I'm not quite sure what to think of. They lose that game. I think it was either 26-0 to the Carolina Panthers. You thought they looked horrible. They're not going to be good this year. And then they come back and they beat the Buffalo Bills. So it's hard to figure right at this point in the season how good they are. New Orleans Saints only 1-6. They have tried to be competitive in games. They just can't ultimately come out on top so far this season with only one win. All right, last division we're going to look at, the NFC West. San Francisco, this is a tough division except for the Arizona Cardinals, who play teams tough but then lose in the end. But right now, the San Francisco 49ers, Seattle Seahawks, and Los Angeles Rams are 5-2. I'm looking at this is interesting because the Jaguars have played all 3 of those teams. They beat the 49ers and then proceeded to lose back-to-back to the Seahawks and the Rams. So I don't know what to think about that one either. But anyway, they're all 5-2. Those 3 teams, all 5-2. San Francisco's in first place because they are 3-0 in the division. Only undefeated team. Seahawks are 1-1. The Rams are 0-1. And the Arizona Cardinals bring up the rear with 0-2 within the division. So that is very competitive. And there's still quite a few division games to go for these teams. We'll have to watch that. So you really have 2 very tough divisions. Really 3 of them. I say, the NFC West, NFC South, even though you thought it would only be, I thought it would be Tampa Bay and maybe Atlanta Falcons. Wasn't really considering the Carolina Panthers, and they may fall off as the season goes along. But really, the NFC North with Green Bay, Detroit, Chicago, and Minnesota, and then you have the NFC West with the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Rams. Those are some tough teams. And then, yeah, I mean, that's pretty rough. This is a tough division. Or conference, I should say. The National Football Conference is incredibly tough. It's hard to pick who will be the team going to Super Bowl out of that conference. Now, looking at the American Football Conference, again, that's pretty hard too. And who would have thought? I would have never guessed this. But right now, after 7 games, the Indianapolis Colts have the best record in the NFL at 6-1. Just ahead of Green Bay Packers, who were 4-1-1. But 6-1 Indianapolis Colts. I really thought, yeah, they got some good players, but I didn't think, I definitely didn't think Richardson was worth spending much time on, and I didn't think Daniel Jones was going to be that good. But boy, he's proving everybody wrong. He has looked very impressive. Their whole offense is just incredible. They've scored 232 points so far this season. That's just crazy. That is more than anybody else in the NFL, including the Detroit Lions, who have 215, and the Dallas Cowboys, who have 222. I mean, last year the Detroit Lions had the most points, and they're still. I mean, 215 is a good number, but right now, the Indianapolis Colts have it with the best record and the most points scored so far this season. So they're the team to beat at this moment, despite what I saw or heard on a TV show where they put the Kansas City Chiefs as the number one team. That's just not right now. All right. Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Appreciate you listening. You will be able to catch this podcast. You can catch it live on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. You can catch it live there or audio. You can also find it audio versions on Spotify and Apple outlets, also any podcast app you might listen to. So appreciate you liking and subscribing to this podcast. And that is a wrap for this episode. Tomorrow we'll dig into some season top 10's. Look at that and take a look at the Thursday night game as well a little bit. So until then, I am out. Appreciate you listening.